This year we are going to spend $58 billion, with a B, on our pets. The care that we provide for them mirrors, in many ways, the care that we provide to our families and ourselves. So these folks are going to spend, collectively, all of us, probably about $15 billion, 1-5, on veterinary care for the animals that we have. To suggest, or it shouldn't be surprising to anyone, that most people regard pets as part of their family. And that makes perfect sense because study after study confirms the common sense understanding that these animals that we socialize with have complex social and emotional lives, that they think and they feel, that they experience love and loss, fear and anxiety, just like we do. We connect with them so deeply because they are so like us. And yet, the tax dollars of these animal lovers will go towards a subsidized killing of 3.5 to 4 million homeless adoptable pets this year. That's about 9,000 dogs and cats every day. Healthy, adoptable dogs and cats are dying in our nation's shelters every day. Killing pets is not only cruel to the animals, it's a soul-destroying activity. Really, killing healthy, adoptable dogs and cats, puppies and kittens, we're better than that. No kill is possible. When my colleagues and I founded Best Friends Animal Society 30 years ago with the intention of bringing an end to the killing of shelter animals, about 17 million animals are being killed in our nation's shelters every year. 17 million. Those of us who said, this is wrong, we were regarded as kooks and crazies out on the fringe. We had no voice, we had no power, we had no authority. We certainly had no seat at the table because most of us were not animal welfare professionals. But today, over 70% of pet-owning public believes now, as we did then, which is that animals should only be killed in shelters if they're either too sick to be treated or too dangerously aggressive to be adopted to the public. So this fringe idea that we held 30 years ago is now a mainstream idea that most people who have a pet believe and understand. No kill is possible. We can save them all, but we need to implement policies and practices that achieve that result. Reno is a no-kill city, so your tax dollars, absolutely, are not being wasted on killing healthy, treatable, adoptable animals. And that didn't just happen accidentally. It was a decision made by the Nevada Humane Society to establish no-kill policies, and they brought in Bonnie Brown, who at one time was one of those voices out here on the fringe, a voice truly in the wilderness. But when she had the opportunity, she brought those ideas into the mainstream and translated the love of the citizens of Reno and Washoe County into life-saving results. And by no kill, I mean that more than 90% of all the animals entering the shelters in Washoe County are either safely returned to their families or adopted to new homes. So that 90% is kind of the benchmark for no kill, and that's the reality here. In fact, it's probably closer to about 94% for this county. But you're not alone. There are 230 other communities, more than 230 other communities, that are already no-kill in this country. So that raises a really, really important question. Isn't it immoral and unethical to kill healthy, adoptable dogs and cats, these animals that we love and regard as part of our families, if there's an alternative? And I believe that it is immoral, and especially when you're using taxpayers' dollars to do the killing. And this brings me back to Katrina. And here's the lesson from Hurricane Katrina. During Hurricane Katrina, tens of thousands of animals died. They didn't die from this floodwater. They died as a result of public policy. They died because human shelters and state and federal evacuation teams were not permitted to take people's pets when they evacuated the people. As a consequence, tens and tens of thousands of animals are left behind. This is particularly disturbing, but now people were told, no, you can't bring your animal, often at gunpoint. If you don't come with me now and leave that dog or that cat, I will shoot the dog or the cat in front of you. Now, I met these folks. I was down there for 4 months running our Best Friends Animal Society's emergency shelters in Tylertown, Mississippi, and Metairie, Louisiana. Every day, people would come looking for a dog or a cat that they were forced to leave behind. It was public policy. And then Congress got into the act, and they, in light of this, the trauma that people were going through, these images that were on the news, as I'm sure you all remember, weeks into this disaster, long after all the people had been evacuated, Congress passed the PETS Act. And the PETS Act basically requires any community that wants to qualify for FEMA funding needs to have an evacuation plan in place for people's pets and service animals. As a result, far fewer animals died or involved in or become part of the mess of subsequent disasters. So, for example, during Hurricane Sandy, which hit an area that was many times more populous than the Gulf Coast of the United States, very few animals were involved in that disaster, and very few animals died. Why? Because of a change in public policy. We need the same kind of urgency and public policy shift to deal with the issue of shelter killing as we had for Hurricane Katrina. Because here's a fact. For shelter animals, every week is a Hurricane Katrina. Over 60,000 animals, healthy, adoptable, dogs and cats, are being killed in our nation's shelters every week. That's a Hurricane Katrina. Despite the fact that we have the wherewithal, we have the know-how, we have the understanding, it can be done. What remains is harnessing the commitment and the resolve of the general public and our civic leadership. And it's reasonable to ask, well, why should people care unless you're an animal advocate? Why should you care what's going on in the shelter down the street behind closed doors? Civic leaders have so many things to worry about and to be concerned about. They actually have humans knocking on their doors. They don't have animals knocking on their doors. Well, here are a couple of good testimonies on that. Here's Dr. Jane Goodall, the world's leading primatologist, and a person who independently and single-handedly, talk about one little citizen, changed the world's relationship and understanding of chimpanzees. And here's what she had to say about companion animals. I learned everything I know about animals in general from the dog I had as a child. He taught me that animals have personalities and minds and feelings, and what a true friend was. I would never have been able to go to Africa if Rusty hadn't died, because I would never have been able to leave him. Well, you might say, well, she's an animal nut too, so you have to take her with a grain of salt. Well, how about this fella, Albert Einstein? Talk about one little citizen again, change the world, absolutely. Our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. I believe that our companion animals are our link, our bridge to that wild world, that beautiful nature. They're the bit of the lion, the bit of the leopard, the bit of the wolf that we include in our lives. How can we ever hope to muster the resources and the commitment to save the whales, the wolves, the elephants, you name it, if we are paying people to kill the animals that we love the most? No-kill communities are a first essential step to, as Einstein says, expanding our circle of compassion and freeing ourselves. And interesting, he says, freeing ourselves from the coarsening effect of killing millions of wonderful, healthy dogs and cats simply because they're an inconvenience. Freeing our children from the burden and the trauma of having a dog or a cat that's part of the family one day and dead the next simply because it winds up in a shelter. And freeing ourselves from the burden of violating the bond of trust that we have with these creatures that have made the journey with us, have been through the passage with us from the ice age to the digital age. No-kill communities are that step. They're that first essential step in widening this circle. They're possible to achieve, and they're the right thing to do. And they're a first step in our evolution as a moral society. By elevating the value and the status of the weakest members of our community, we elevate the value and the status of all members of our community. When my friends and I started Best Friends Animal Society 30 years ago, it was kind of a crapshoot. We had very little money, very little resources. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was 3,000 spectacularly beautiful acres of sand and sagebrush. But we were in debt because we just purchased this white elephant property. But we persevered. That's what we started with. That was ground zero. When our funds ran out, we set up fundraising tables at grocery stores across Utah and Arizona and Colorado and New Mexico and Nevada and California. Folks thought we were crazy, and with good reason. We had no practical skills. I mean, we were a bunch of remnant of 60s idealists puttering around in the desert, no experience living in the high plateaus. The first buildings we built were only possible because we scavenged materials from the demolition of an airport in Texas and a children's hospital in Nevada. But we persevered. We, and I mean we, not the construction company or the phone company or anybody else, rolled out miles of cable and trenches that we dug for power lines. We developed the water systems. We did this. When we were down, we got up. We built our crazy dream into one of the world's largest and most influential animal welfare organizations. And we helped to start a movement and have led a movement that's changed the face of animal welfare. A few people did this with very few resources and very little money. So this was going on at that time. This was the early 80s, and just to give you a brief idea, Reagan was shot, the Pope was shot, Marine barracks were blown up in Lebanon. AIDS was identified as a global health threat. Star Wars initiative, anybody remember that? Space-based weapons of mass destruction. Of course, the Middle East was at war, and all the warnings related to global warming, climate change, environmental degradation that had been percolating up from the 50s and 60s and 70s had all gone ignored. So for us, the middle of the desert was as good a place as any. We really didn't have much. All we had was the conviction that the lives of these animals have intrinsic value and that they're not ours to dispose of or to destroy. In fact, there's us you may have met one of us at a table. There she is, can you help? Would you like to make a donation? It's the power and the commitment of an idea. If you're prepared to stand up, if you're prepared to prioritize your vision in all that you do, of course we can make a change. And as Margaret Mead said, that's all that ever does make a change. So whether that's saving a species, saving shelter pets, transforming your community, or transforming this beautiful theater into a community art space. If you're prepared to stand up and take some arrows in the chest, prioritize your vision, anything is possible. Thank you.